Phenoms and Phenoms in the making. Welcome to In the Car with Shae. I am your host, Shae Daniels. As always, I am super excited about today's broadcast. Today, I have my good friend on with us in the car with Shae, my friend, Dr. Daryl Jackson. Daryl and I have been friends for some time now. As a matter of fact, as I thought about this recording, I thought about how we would spend a lot of time in my car riding around the city of Cleveland. So
Having
the
the same.
fact that yes, and the fact that we are here today
Right.
and we're doing this podcast, this is just incredible. So Daryl, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody in the car with Shae audience.
All right. Good morning, kings and queens. My name is Daryl Jackson. I am currently living in the Washington, D.C. area. I work for the National Drug Court Institute, and basically, I am a national project director. So, my job is that I oversee and implement drug treatment courts. Treatment instead of incarceration is what we do. And basically, I go around the United States and U.S. territories helping courts start up their treatment courts for individuals suffering from drug and alcohol addiction.
Incredible, incredible. So, Daryl, let's talk about our history. So, we met, I want to say in 2007.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Wow, that's been a while.
Yeah.
2007. And we met because we were doing the Court Unruly program together, and you were finishing up your master's degree.
Yep.
At Now, where were you going for your master's again?
Started at Case Western, then ended at Cleveland State.
Started at Case and then ended at Cleveland State.
Yep.
I end up, because of you was the reason I entered into Cleveland State for the
Yeah.
master's program. That's right, because you encouraged me to go back and get my master's degree. And I was saying the whole time, Daryl, I think I'm too old to go back to get my master's degree. I said, by the time I get in the classroom, I'll be in my 40s. And you were like, so what?
Right. Knock it out.
Right. Like, what does it matter? And you were so right. I'm so glad that you encouraged me to do that. And I must admit that I'm absolutely enjoying my time in the classroom. I really
Yeah.
am. So, going back to, I thought it was so ironic when I was, as I mentioned at the intro, how the name of the podcast is In the Car with Shae. And that was a lot of the time that we spent together because you were shadowing me a
Right.
lot of times
Yeah.
with the Court Unruly program. And then we both went on to work together for Systems of Care,
Yeah.
which is a program that helped youth who and their families who were in need of services. So we spent a lot of time working with young people and their families, and we have stories upon stories.
Absolutely. 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 But such a rewarding experience, though. Such a
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. It was definitely we learned a lot,
Mhm.
and I think it helped um further foster compassion
Yep.
for people, even though we were both compassionate people
Mhm.
in the areas of work that we were already, found ourselves in. But once you're in the trenches and you're doing the work,
Mhm.
so to speak, it really does take on a whole deeper level of compassion and empathy that you need to show and give out to others. So it was definitely an incredible time and awesome friendship that has formed since coming together and meeting each other at the job. So,
Well, let me add something to that also.
uh-huh.
The compassion for people alone, but also what you taught me in that process is that still having compassion for people, but also the love of God. And so I
Mhm.
also want to thank you for that too, because
Oh,
there was a certain just general teaching that you gave me just about how you would conduct yourself and how you would conduct yourself with other professionals. And I would, sit back from afar and look at that. So thank you for that. Now, I always didn't take those things in, but but I saw them. I saw a great representation of that. There.
oh my goodness. Yeah, we got stories about that too that we laugh about.
Absolutely.
Because there are days that Darren was like, I don't know why you messing with these people. Leave them
Right.
go. I would tell these people goodbye.
Let my people go, literally. But
Oh,
you
there were
know,
days that I should have listened to your advice on that one.
right.
Save me some headaches
And heartaches, okay?
and heartaches for sure. For sure. There are times that you have to say, this is our time to part ways and let's
Cut
keep
the
moving. May the
ties.
Lord watch between me and thee. Oh, and for those of you who are my very faithful listeners, you may have meant or remembered hearing Daryl's name mentioned by my guest Carmela Richardson when she talked about Case Western Reserve University.
Yeah.
And Daryl is the gentleman that she was mentioning. That's him here in the flesh right now. If you're watching this on YouTube, and how he's such a great dresser. Daryl has always been an impeccable dresser. Let not anyone take that for granted. And that story, though, that she told me, I don't even know if you can remember how hard I laughed on the podcast because I was screaming because I thought about you. I was like, if this isn't Daryl, this
Yeah.
isn't Daryl because that was hilarious.
And she told it very accurately, actually.
Oh, you know she's gonna do that. You know that. She is a great storyteller. She can tell a story.
And she was also another person, even in the classroom, not
Mhm,
even knowing that you two were connected, but she
mhm.
was also another great person who showed me that there's a different way to approach people. There's a different way to handle things. And not saying that I didn't have that growing up,
Right.
but to see people away from your family, because I was about 13 hours away from home.
Yes.
And the first time really being detached from the family unit, but to see other people to model Christ-like behavior, even in the midst of, what I thought at the time were just wilderness experience. I mean, I was out there not really knowing what my next steps were. I knew that I was in school, but I didn't know what that would lead to.
Right.
So seeing people like you and Miss Richardson and even her husband and
Mhm.
your husband, seeing people like that, those were all great role models, not knowing it at the time, but now I look back on it, I'm like, hey, there were some people that were looking out for me even when I didn't know it. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's
those
so great. That
I
is so
appreciate that.
great. Yeah, that's awesome. So Daryl, tell me a little bit. I know quite a bit about you and your life and your upbringing, and that's one of the things I wanted to really share with the audience in this broadcast. But we've already discussed we're going to bring you back for some other topics as well, especially dealing with your work for drug court
Yeah.
and your knowledge and expertise in social work and so many facets that you can bring a great bit of knowledge to. But your upbringing and the things that you had to overcome growing up, I think, is a inspirational story that I really want to hone in on.
Mhm.
So, can you start by just sharing with the audience where you're from and a little more about your history?
Okay. So a little bit, I was born in South Carolina, Chester, South Carolina, which is a little town that's right outside of Columbia, South Carolina. For those who don't know, population about 5,500 people, one high school, one middle school, one elementary school, and born to a 14-year-old African American female. And at the time, I think my dad had just turned 16
Mm.
on February 5th, and I was born on February 10th. And so, I guess them just being kids and, families being in two different socioeconomic statuses, I think. Um, and I'm sure a whole bunch of other different factors came into place, but, they were kids having a baby. And
Mhm.
so essentially, I was raised, once all of the drama blew over, I guess, I was raised by, started with both grandparents on both sides, then essentially ended up being with my dad's family
Mhm.
overall. But still having a good relationship with both sides, I would say. But my dad's family helped raise me. So my dad's mom, who my dad's parents were no longer together, so it was essentially just my grandmother. And my grandmother was being assisted by her parents.
Mm.
And I also knew my grandmother's grandparents or grandmother.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, so I had a um, healthy background as learning family history, I'll say. On my mom's side, I did not necessarily know my mother's grandparents because they had, passed away, but I am still, very close to my mom's mama, everything. But um, just the different challenges as to growing up, with young parents, seeing things that you shouldn't have seen, hearing things that you shouldn't hear. But I will say overall, I still had a very rich upbringing. And so for me, didn't know it then, like I was said earlier, but realizing it now that I had people looking out for me, even when my parents weren't able to do so.
Right.
It took me a long time to understand, why they weren't connecting the dots for me as a child. And so connecting the dots for me looks like, you know, playing football, making sure you show up at school for choir concerts or whatever that looks like. But my grandparents were always there.
Mhm.
There were times when both of my parents were there, but there were also times I could remember when they weren't there. And
Right.
so for me, those elements stood out the most when you're not there, when I'm looking for you and I don't see you. Now, granted, there were a lot of different factors that came into play. I think my dad was in school and college, by this time, I'm like, 5, 6, 7. But those are the moments that children psychologically remember the most.
Right.
Those upbringing moments, those are pivotal moments. And especially male heirs, people often say that little boys need their dads.
Mhm.
I think that little boys need their moms to show them that nurturing side,
Very
that
true.
caring, that compassionate side. And growing up, I would hear my grandmother say, "Well, I'm here." She would, act as my mom. She would act as my dad so
Right.
many ways. But for me, I knew and I needed my birth mother. I
Right.
knew and I needed my birth father.
Mhm.
Um, and they're both, really good people in their own right. But I had to realize, thank God through formal education, is that they had to deal with some things. And so the way that they come off now as adults are side effects or conditions of how they were reared, as well as my grandparents and as well as their parents. And so the only thing that I can try to do now is correct or modify those actions as best as I can. So when I'm talking to young people or adults about how they perceive their parents or how they conduct themselves, I'm always saying to people, remember, give people just a little bit of compassion because you don't know what they've been through. But
Absolutely.
it took me a long time to get to where I am,
Yeah.
because hurt is real.
Very much so.
It's
And
real.
I know that our background in working with youth in particular,
Mhm.
and I saw it even more intensely once I started working for Department of Children and Families and children in foster care. But there is something that I truly believe is innate in us, birthed in us, that we long for the
Mhm.
connection with our biological parents. There is something within us that is configured in our DNA to connect with the people that are responsible for us being here.
Mhm.
And I saw that so much with the children in foster care, that despite the person that was there for them, whether it was me as their social worker or their foster parent, or at some point their adoptive parent, no matter that being the case, there was a longing and a desire to connect with that biological parent. And of course, I always also connected with the spiritual, that's
Mhm.
that spiritual piece, that likewise, as human beings, we are, you know we are created and made to connect with our heavenly Father too, the one who created us. So we know that, the parents that we have are just the channels through which we come through, but there is that desire to connect. And that when we don't have that connection, there is, what I've learned, an orphan heart that manifests. And that orphan heart is the one that's looking for approval, looking for acceptance, looking for attachment with whomever they can find it.
It's
Or
so
and we're seeking to fill that hole, that gap of where that parent missed the mark. And we know that a parent can be in the home and still not be there.
Yep.
or a parent can be involved in some way, but still not meet the emotional needs or physical needs of that child.
Mhm.
So it's so multifaceted, but you're so right that um, I really do believe the older that you get, the more sensitive and aware you become to who your parents are as human beings,
Right. Right.
and that they had a past prior to your coming on the scene.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hmm.
But even working in those fields, that job also helped me to see myself in a lot of those children. But it also helped me to realize that it could have gone another way. I
Yes.
could have, not been with my natural parents or grandparents, so to speak. I
Mhm.
could have been in somebody else's household. So I'm thankful for that also. But on the downside to it, I also experienced a lot of counter transference. And
Mm.
so, seeing things and I'm, like I kind of acting out. Even as an adult, you're like, well, dang, why do I still feel this way? But you
Mhm.
start to realize that, okay, now I'm upset with this mom because I'm realizing that, she didn't do things that my mom it was the same like
Right.
mirror on the wall type
Mhm.
perspective. So I had to learn how to deal with my own counter transfers. Going through therapy was very helpful for me. Growing up in the South, you hear people say, well, go to church and pray and God will make everything go away. But
Mhm.
no, sometimes you need a little help by some
Exactly.
earthly folks. So I need that help. And so I'll make sure I got it.
That's right.
And even now, as an adult, I want to encourage listeners and now as an adult, if you need the help, seek the help, get the help. Um, it's not a stigma, I don't think, attached to it like it used to be. Uh,
Right.
I think it's a stigma attached to it when you don't get the help you need. Like, how
Right.
dare
And
you
you gotta
die?
right, you
Yeah,
got a tag on you saying, watch out for this one because
right,
they a
right,
mess. Right.
right. Talking about the side effects label, okay? That's what that is.
Right. Yeah, it's very true. I am a firm believer in therapy that, you need someone to be that sounding board,
Mm,
someone that's going to give you a reality check, and you're going to need to come to the table willing to do the work,
mhm.
and not just think they're going to likewise magically cause everything to be
Right.
all right. Same thing with prayer. You have to put in the work,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
I think what you said is so true that especially in the church, it has just been okay, just pray about it and everything will be okay.
Mhm.
But if you're praying, but
Mhm.
yet you don't have a dialogue, it's just a monologue where you're telling God everything that you want or everything that's wrong, and you're not either able to hear Him or
Mhm.
taking the time to hear Him. And then in hearing Him, trying to put in practice what needs to be done. Where is the healing? Where is the also the accountability?
Right.
Because
Right.
it's real easy to keep putting God off
Mhm.
when you know what he said and then you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to get to that. But if you have someone that you're going to on a weekly basis and they're calling you on that particular action that you need to take, I think it's so valuable. And I think that the profession of counseling and psychologist and psychiatrist is such a needed profession and necessary for our society
Yeah.
to heal. And I think it's God given in many respects.
I heard someone say faith without works is dead. I've
Mm-hmm.
heard that before, and I truly believe that. But
Mm-hmm.
even in the midst of that, sometimes, and again, I don't know if this is a Southern thing or a Black thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we put so much um, effort and trust within the church itself, and so church hurt is something that I also experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And some people say, well, church hurt is not a real thing. Oh yeah, it is a
It's
real.
real.
It's very real. And so I remember, having certain instances that would happen in my life. And I remember going into the church and I would see, hear um, church mothers or people, saying little things about myself or about my mom. Like my mom would get into legal trouble. And I
Mm-hmm.
would, notice that there was a look or feel when we came into the church instead of an embrace. And
Wow.
so as a kid, I knew that I needed and wanted that embrace, but I also had the optical illusion that the church, the building, the sanctuary, the people within the church were the place that I could actually go get it. So just
Mm.
like, our parents, they're hurt people in church. And so
Yep.
hurt people hurt other people, no matter where they are, whether it be in the synagogue or the Baptist church, the AME church, your house, my house.
Right. Right.
So I just had to remember once I, got into the church, really, I had to start fostering my own relationship and, my own level of intimacy with God
Yes.
and, realizing that church was a hospital. And
Mhm.
that was the analogy I played in my head. The church is a hospital. And so everybody who comes to the hospital, i.e. the church, these are all hurt people. These are all weary, wounded, saddened, laden people who come into the church and who are seeking a healing. And so, my healing is no different from your healing. And I had to come here for my own level of healing. So that's how I started to view the church and started to get through that church hurt. Now, what happens now in my older day, you just can't say anything you want to say to me in the church. So, okay.
Right, because you grown now. You
I'm,
grown.
I'm too young to say anything you want to say. And that's just a warning to all listeners. So, the side effects label. Okay. So
You
that's
know I'm
it.
gonna take that now. You know I'm gonna take that saying now, the side effects label.
That's it. It's on my back and forehead. This is the side effects if you push too hard in the church, okay?
Oh, that's too much. I
Because
got
everybody has a side effects label if you think about it.
they do.
It's trauma. It's post trauma. It's
Hmm.
if you be real about it, it's like certain smells. There's a side effect.
Yes,
Certain things you
yes.
hear as a side effect. We think we're over certain things, but let a certain time of year or a season come about. You realize, okay, this is my side effect of this thing that happened to me. So
Absolutely.
everybody has a side effect label, and I give a lot of analogies to help people, clients, and even family to understand where I'm coming from.
Hmm.
And for me, I've noticed that helps with my communication with people who may not understand general professional jargon, so to speak.
Very true. I think that I found that when we were working with Cordon Ruli and Sisters of Care, that analogies really did help to break things down, especially for the youth that we were encountering. That if they didn't have that analogy or scenario provided to them,
Mm-hmm.
they just weren't getting it. They weren't connecting the dots at
Right,
all. Yeah. So you're so right about that, and that's it's valuable to be able to relate deeper concepts in that way.
right, right.
Yeah, and necessary.
Yeah, and I feel like that even in church, to be able to talk from a theologian level and
Mhm.
break it all the way down for the people who may not be able to get it, and so I find that to be very useful on every
True.
aspect.
True. I also figured, and I know you know this because at times we were together, that there were ways to slip scripture in, especially the young people that were not familiar with the word.
Yeah.
And I would, you would say, have you ever heard somebody say this or that? And they're like, no. And then you would break it down to them and they're getting the word and they didn't even know it.
Right, right. It's your
Yeah.
ministry, right?
Right, right, right. That was always fun. I
Yeah,
always liked that. That
that's
was cool. Uh-huh. That was really good. So
yeah.
tell me, with your upbringing and being primarily raised by your grandmother, and I know that we've talked about her and just what a phenomenal woman she is,
Mhm.
and all that she's contributed to your life. I know that when you were moving forward in your education and then going on to college, one of the things that you made me very envious about, which you probably don't know this, is the fact that you went to a HBCU.
Uh-huh.
And even though I applied and was accepted to several, didn't go. And knowing your experience really had me, second guess, man, I should have just went on ahead and went either to Howard or Hampton, one of those that I
It's
was
not too
accepted.
late.
I don't think I want to go back now. I done
Not
got
too
this
late.
good master's degree. I think I'm good.
Line up.
Whew, Lord.
I know. Well, I always knew, even as a student, a high school student, even before then, I had this family friend that would take some of us in the church, 2 different historically Black colleges, homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
And I also knew that I had aunts and uncles who went to HBCUs, well, great aunts and uncles rather. But I always knew, and I remember even to now I'm thinking about it, I even remember being in my dad's college dorm room and seeing him play football at Livingstone College in Salisbury, North Carolina. And so I remember those HBCU experience. I remember the drum and the tack of the band. I remember the high step, and I remember the concerts, the choir concerts. And so as a kid, that whole a different world experience,
Different
I
world.
remember, seeing myself walking
Yes.
through that process. And so HBCU, I always knew that I wanted to go to one. Not sure which one I wanted to go, but I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I went to Johnson C. Smith
Yeah.
University on a choir scholarship.
No, I didn't know it was a choir scholarship. Now that
Yeah,
I didn't know. I knew
yeah,
where you went, but not that it was a choir scholarship.
yeah. I was never good in football, never good as an athlete, but one thing I can do is read a good sheet music, okay? so, so I had this guy who was a new teacher at my high school, a young Black guy, and for years we had, white choral teachers, but he came in and he was an HBCU graduate, and he said, you could um, utilize a skill to get a choir scholarship. I'm like, I've never heard of that before.
Mhm.
But we started working together after school on choir music. One day he met with my grandmother, and he was like, I think that he has the skills to not compete. So I would start competing locally and statewide in choir competitions, and then doing solo competitions. And there would be a ribbon here, a trophy there, no grand prize. But I think because I got a later start than everyone,
Mm-hmm.
but we started to apply to schools, and he started to reach out to those different departments about monies that they had available for students that wanted to come sing. And I knew that I didn't want to major in music, but I also knew that I didn't come from a Bush family. I didn't come from, a family who had oil wells, so to speak.
Right.
I was literally raised by my grandmother, who was a single head of household female who was trying to work and to support her child's child,
Mm.
and who wasn't receiving any public assistance, who wasn't receiving any type of child support. She was literally paying for everything out of her pocket to help
Wow.
supply, that I had a roof and food and, the basic needs, so to speak, and much more.
Yes.
But I started auditioning, and then I got a offer letter to Johnson C. Smith, and I went there on a choir scholarship. Now I was able to later land a scholarship from Morris College from an academic standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want to do the South Carolina thing anymore. So I went to Johnson C. Smith, and I remember my grandmother, my dad, we pulled up at a freshman college day, and my grandmother made it very known that this is where you chose to go, and you make sure you make the best out of it. Because if you come home, there's gonna be some issues. Because I told you to get somewhere local, okay? But I went there, and Johnson C. Smith was the school. I tell people that I was experiencing some colorism, growing up within my own family. Um,
Mm.
from some other cousins, and who would say stuff like you're dark, and oh, he spits coffee, or don't pick him
Wow.
on your team because you won't see him at night, things like that.
Wow.
But Johnson C. Smith was a school that helped me understand and to really, really, really capitalize on my Blackness. And so what that meant for me is that I learned the lyrics of Let There Be Voices Sing, and I
Mm.
learned what that meant. I
Yes.
also, we had to learn the school alma mater. And in that school alma mater, it talked about holding high the golden blue and what that felt like for me to be a part of a unit or a system and not feel like I was separated from my own family, own people, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a school, that was a time in my life that I really felt like I grew up.
Mm.
Uh, that was one level of growing up, one level of me becoming a little bit more confident and a little bit more uh, vocal. I was always vocal now, but now I'm able to speak with a little more intellect.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to connect the dots, so to speak. So I tell people that HBCUs have often got bad raps, but for me,
Mm-hmm.
It was a place where it was just right. It gave
Right.
me that extra love, that extra care that I needed. And I even remember professors coming in my dorm room saying, I haven't seen you in class.
Mm.
I'll see you there in 30 minutes. you know,
Wow.
and it helped me to know again that was somebody else that was looking out for me.
Looking out for you. That's right. That's excellent. And that's one thing I definitely can sense for those friends that I have that attended HBCUs, that there is definitely a sense of camaraderie and
Mhm.
family that continues even once they've left the institution.
Absolutely.
That there are those that you can reach out to that will lend a hand, that will help you out, that will give reference, that will what have you. You see
Yeah.
that on such a deep level for those who have attended HBCUs, which I think is just valuable. It's really, really valuable. And it's a side note. I my interview for season 3, the first interview, I met with a fitness coach, Coach Ruben, and
Sure.
we didn't know this. He actually is from Ohio, just up the road from where I grew up in Cleveland. He was in Warren, and
Okay.
it's a rural, small town. And he's a member of a fraternity. He's a Q, and
Oh,
I didn't know that he attended Warren G. Hardy High School, which is like the major high school there in Warren.
mhm.
And he told me that he had the same feeling that I did, that he wished that he had attended at HBCU. But what surprised me was that he said that he never even knew much about HBCUs, if
I do that
anything.
so often.
Isn't that something? And I was really taken aback. And then of course, I then remembered the age difference because I believe he told me he graduated in 2010, excuse me,
Mhm.
from high school. So it was something because I said, wait a minute, what do you mean you didn't know about HBCUs? Because my generation, we grew up watching A Different World,
Mhm.
and Different World just put a spotlight on
Absolutely.
HBCUs, and it was just like the thing. Like
Mhm.
once we go, we're going.
Right.
And so to hear that also made me think about the importance of and my concern regarding um, things being lost
Yeah.
in our generation and in our culture, because I'm already seeing that there are young people that have little to no knowledge about Black history, and what is the value
Yeah.
of the accomplishments of those that have gone before us. So even in my classroom, in a third grade classroom, I'm constantly putting before them information regarding our history and the
Mhm.
significance of things that have happened and those that have gone before. And I am resolute on the fact that once we get into Black History Month, we focus in on Dr. King and Rosa Parks in January. But
Absolutely.
once we hit February, I've already decorated my room
Mhm.
for Black History Month already, and I still have to do my door. But even as I'm in the process of decorating the back wall, my students are saying, "Well, is that going to be Dr. King? Is that no?" Because there's more to Black history
Absolutely.
than Dr. King. While he is phenomenal and a treasure, you need to know there's more to our history than just him and Rosa Parks.
Absolutely.
So, and I can't tell you how many times in the course of creating the board, I heard that phrase over and over again, and I'm having to say over and over again,
Right.
no, there's more to our history. But I think it gets into what I'm seeing too, going back to your upbringing. um, I think about the value of being in contact with generations that you had,
Mhm.
which is a real rarity,
Mhm.
to have access to both your grandparent, your great grandparent, and if I'm not mistaken, your great great grandparent.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
very, very rare, very rare. But there's such value in having them a part of your life because you're able to get more insight and knowledge into the history, their wisdom that they've garnered in their life. And I am a very much aware now, especially this year, that there are parents that are not having meaningful conversations with their children.
Mm.
And it's frightening on some level, that they're just things that they don't know. And
Yeah.
it's just like, but I knew this
Hmm.
at, at 8 or 9. Why is it that you don't know this at 8 or 9?
Right.
And I think there is a mix of some coddling that's going on, but also detachment, because they've just gotten so busy that they don't want to have any meaningful conversation. So I would think, if you could just even share some insight that you garnered just from being in the presence of those generations, even as a young child, there's some things
What?
that you just pick up.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that really stand out to me this time of year is that I remember when Dr. King, they talk about February and Black History Month, and I think Dr. King was killed in April.
Yes.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember my great grandmother saying that that was the same day that her father passed away.
Wow.
I remember her saying that, and sitting in the hospital watching, them announcing Dr. King's death, but also hearing that her father had died. So that's one thing that kind of always stuck with me. Um,
Wow.
I also remember, hearing how, again, going back to colorism, even in the own family, how the lighter skinned children were treated differently from the dark skinned children. And I found that to be
Mm.
kind of weird within families, but to see it even carry out through, my generation, then it's kind of like, well, yeah, they was doing it then in the family, they're doing it now.
Right.
But even in the midst of all of those, what I deem to be negative things, I also remember my great grandparents, my great grandfather, most importantly, he was a man of true honor. Like for me, he was my Superman. And
Wow.
yeah, he helped raise my father. It was my grandmother's father. But I remember, when my mom and dad would get into these spats with each other, my mom wouldn't let me see my dad or whatever, how that would go, that whole such situation. But I remember my grandfather in this blue Fred Sanford style truck would ride through the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
He would ride back through the neighborhood, and I would hear my mom say, "Your grandfather's out there." Um, and I would go to the window and he would be standing there or sitting in his truck and he would have a bag of groceries.
Mm.
Brown paper bag. Now, my mom also had other children who were not by my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the only child by my dad, with her. But he would make sure that there was enough groceries, fruits and vegetables, and brown russet potatoes and banana. He loved bananas and just general things health wise we needed as kids. There was no junk food
Right.
um, to provide nourishment for us. And he would always say to me, make sure you share with your siblings.
Wow.
But he would also say to me, because I think he knew or had some insight, if something happens, I need to instill in him what he should do. And so
Mm.
he would say, do you have any money in your pocket? And I was like, yes, sir, or no, sir. And
Mm-hmm.
so remember in the Levi's jeans, there was a little
The
coin
little,
spot at the
right.
top.
Uh-huh.
So he would always put a quarter in my pocket right there. He
Oh,
would say to
wow.
me, if something ever happens to you, what's my phone number?
Very
Go in
good.
my pocket and dial my phone number. If something ever happens to you, remember you always need to keep a quarter in your pocket. And every now and then I get a pair of jeans with that little slide on it, and
Uh,
I'll check for that quarter. Now, there's not a paper on this site anywhere, but I'll
Nowhere.
check that quarter. My grandpa told me, you call me if something goes wrong.
Oh, that's awesome.
In the essence of that, I just remember him being just this great man.
Mhm.
He provided. He was a true provider, and
Beautiful.
so provided for me. And at this particular time when I was born, my dad was living in their household because my grandfather and grandmother got a divorce, and she moved back in with her parents. So now you
Gotcha.
got this 15-year-old who was his grandchild bringing another child into the house. So you
Wow.
have multi-generational of men.
Mm.
And so I would just see my grandfather do manly things and, he would, cut grass and fix things around the house. And I would just watch, never
Mm-hmm.
participating, okay, but I would just watch. And to see him do that, he was just, again, I thought he could do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything he said was right for me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though my grandfather's favorite word was bastard, but But for me, everything he did was just right. And so that was one of the things that I appreciate. One of the major things, amongst other things, but my great grandfather was a true role model for me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Very, that's just awesome. Just absolutely awesome and funny at the same time.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. There are a lot of things that are caught by children, even
Mhm.
more so that are taught.
Mhm.
And being observant
Mhm.
is important in life in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Now, Daryl, one of the things that has always impressed me about you was your desire for education and your understanding of the value
Mhm.
of education. Now, share with our audience what age were you? At what point in time did you obtain your PhD?
In 2015, I think I was 31, 32, somewhere in that age bracket.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah.
Very
And
much so.
so for me, the PhD was something that I wanted to do. I know my grandmother, she really pushed me to do graduate school. And I remember hearing people say, well, you need to stay around here closer to home. And so I remember having this opportunity to go to Case Western, and my grandmother was like, if you want to go, I'll pick up a part-time job. If you want to
Mm,
go, I'll make sure it happens for you. Now, at this time, she's approaching retirement,
mhm.
but my grandmother made sure that I had money every single pay period she had money,
Wow. Wow.
um, paying rent. My grandma paid rent. You know,
Wow.
I was just basically working to have money in my pocket to buy clothes, as they would say,
Mhm.
the little essentials that I needed. But my grandmother was the true person to push me through graduate school. And I even recall that one of the main reasons why I switched from Case Western to Cleveland State is that I didn't have finances to carry me through school. At that time, Case was like 32 or $36,000. And
Incredible.
I didn't have money for that, but I tried to make it work. But I ended up talking to another professor that told me about Cleveland State. Went over there, and my grandmother, and I was like, "Well, I need money to go to school, and this is my last semester, and I don't have da 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 da." My grandma was like, "Well, how much does it cost?" And I'm like, "I think it's about $10,000 to $12,000 a year." She was like, "Well, go get me the exact figures or whatever." And I'll
Mhm.
never forget this. The next morning, or later that evening, she called and said, "Did you check your account?" And I was like, "No." And so she was like, "Well, go check your account and then go pay that bill at the school."
Wow.
I was like, I was just shocked. And I remember sitting in my car crying, like bawling,
Mm.
because, I knew that she didn't have it, but she
Mhm.
was able to go get it.
My
She
God.
went to the bank and took out a loan, and she paid that loan back herself.
Mm.
And the agreement was, well, when you get money, you send me money to pay off this loan. This is your loan. It's in my name, but it's your loan. And
Mhm.
I remember at graduation, there was a receipt and a card, and that was the loan paid off by my grandmother from the bank. And so, even just talking about it, I get emotional because
I'm about to cry right here. My eyes getting watery. Stop it.
it's like the love of somebody who didn't birth you.
Yes.
The unconditional love for somebody who believed in your dream. When other
Mhm.
people told you shouldn't do it. Why are you going to Ohio? You don't know anybody in Ohio.
Mhm.
It's cold. All the other things that they said. My grandmother was like, if you want to do this, go.
Wow.
Make it happen for yourself. Because again, I often said on this podcast, I wasn't good with my hands. I didn't play football, but one thing I knew I had was a brain.
Mhm.
I knew that I could write, I knew that
Yes.
I could read, and I knew that I could access other things by just those simple talents and skills alone.
Yeah.
And she pushed me to do it. And so I'm going to I feel like I'm just forever indebted to her
Mhm.
for that. But, I'm sorry, I don't know what to say, but she's just,
You got me over here holding back tears, seriously, because that's
just
just
helped me through it a lot. But,
mm.
you know, my grandmother, she didn't go to graduate school and she didn't go to college. She got married to my grandfather, I think right out of high school, and they moved away and had my father and my aunt. And, unfortunately, their marriage didn't work out.
Mhm.
But she saw the value in education because all of her other siblings went. She,
Mm. Wow.
her parents went. They all, had HBCU experiences and stuff like that. And she just instilled in me that you got to get it. And so the PhD thing, I remember one time saying, I'm just going to stop.
Mm.
It's too much. I kept going through this dissertation writing thing, and I wasn't passing the segments as fast as I should to proceed to the next segment of the writing portion of the dissertation.
Mm-hmm.
And I would kind of got defeated. And my grandma was like, "Oh no, you started this. You
You gonna
gonna
finish
finish
it? I know
it.
that's right.
How long it take you? You gonna finish it." And so I ended up finishing it, and it was one of the greatest accomplishments. And I remember coming off the stage, receiving my degree after the hoodie ceremony, and my grandmother just grabbed me and she cried, and we embraced for the
Oh.
longest time. But I think she was the person who saw things in me that other people didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I didn't always have this drive. I remember even acting out in high school because I wanted the attention of my mom and dad.
Wow.
I also remember being in high school having a guidance counselor say to my grandmother in front of me that he will never be able to succeed at a four-year college or university because of his current grades. And I remember my grandmother looking over at me, patting me on my knee, and said, "All right, you know what that means, don't you?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." But what that meant for us was code.
Right.
Prove to them what they
That's right.
say that you aren't going to do. And
That's right.
so, my biggest message I would give to anybody that's listening, oftentimes you hear people say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But is it truly fair to tell someone to do that when they don't necessarily have on a pair of shoes?
Right.
But if you got socks on,
Mm-hmm.
if you got the last little bit of toenails you got, by all means, fight for your life
I
because
know that's right.
you know, it's hard out here for people in general, and to be a black man in today's society, and not taking anything away from women, but just
Mm-hmm.
even black in
Yes.
today's society. It's so hard, and I've experienced it. You know, being pulled over since I moved to DC by a cop saying to me, "Well, you're a doctor of what? Can you prove to me?" And I told him,
Mm.
"Sir, I don't have anything to prove to you. You can Google me." You know, like,
Help me, Jesus. I know that's right. Google me.
I don't need to prove anything. And so just that alone, told me that I wasn't good enough in his eyes.
Mm.
But the validation that I needed was already within me because I received it from my family.
Right.
That I'm good enough to be whoever I want to be. And no, I don't feel like I'm where I want to be right now, but I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be. And
Mm.
so I have to learn how to simmer in that, fester in that, and labor within that so that I can get to the next place I want to be. So, I'm just working it, the best way I can, honestly.
I'm so proud of you, but you know that. I've
Yeah,
been proud of you.
appreciate it.
You're
Appreciate
just an incredible, incredible individual. And you also, when you were in the process of obtaining your PhD, you wrote a book
it. Yeah,
about your upbringing and the role that your grandmother played
yeah.
in your upbringing. What's the name of the book?
African American males being raised by their grandparents and the psychological effects.
Share some about the book
And
for
so,
those that
what the
are
book
taking
essentially is a research-based book. And so, I looked at African American children, or men rather, being boys being raised in the North versus the South. I
notes.
did a comparison contrast work group where it looked at how kids were being raised in the South versus the North, but also in single parent grandparent households versus two family grandparent households. And
Mm-hmm.
so, knowing that it does have some psychological effects. Number one, naturally, because you're not with you're not with your mom and father, but
Mm-hmm.
most of all, single parent grandparents experience things different because again, they're single trying to raise a kid. And so
Right.
sometimes those situations are not always rosy situations. And I
Right.
do recall even growing up in my own household, not taking anything away from my grandmother, but she would struggle. And sometimes, the way she would respond to me wasn't always the most loving, but, now I realize it was out of, I'm trying to, make this and do this the best way I can for you. And all of these other things are piling upon me. And so
Right.
as an adult and as a human,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes she reacted out. And so sometimes she would say things that now have psychological effects on me, whether it be, you know, and I don't want to let listeners think that psychological always means something bad.
Right, because it
Sometimes
doesn't.
psychological is a good thing too.
Right,
And
right.
so
Sometimes it's the kick in the butt you need to move forward,
absolutely,
or a
absolutely.
way to handle a situation that you wouldn't know how to handle otherwise.
Absolutely. And
Mhm.
another great example was, you know, how I just said that, you know, to experience that love for somebody. That to me, it baffled me. Like, how can you
Mm,
provide this for someone that you didn't even birth? You know, it was
right.
psychological for me. I couldn't understand it, how she would respond to me and act as if she was my mother. And I knew my mother was, you know, somewhere close by.
Mhm.
So for me, that was psychological. But on the negative side to it, it would be like, she would say things, and I'm just gonna say, for an example, she would say, "Well, you know, I've raised my kids,
Mm,
you know," and so for
mhm.
me, it's kind of like, "Well, I thought I am your child," you know, so
Right, right,
it's logical too.
right.
But you know, I get it now. I get it.
Yes.
I respect it. But that's just a little clip about the book. I hope to one day write another book, more so maybe a memoir,
Yes.
using some things that have happened in my life. Maybe not necessarily putting the people's actual names, but you know, honestly, I've seen some things growing up. My mom was addicted to drugs and alcohol.
Mhm.
I've seen some things in that arena. I also have experienced some things where my father, he married my stepmother, and even me, you know, not necessarily experiencing the full love that you think would have come from that union, so to speak,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
Mhm.
So not taking anything away from them too, but they have two children, beautiful children, sister and brother, and they live amazing lives. And I know that now is because it took my dad to mature through me, so that
Right,
now he can be a better, effective father. Um,
right.
but the psychological effect of that, you know,
Mhm.
it's like, well, dang, okay, um, why couldn't you do that for me? But now, you know, I know that it took me as the test project, so to speak. So
The oldest child is always the guinea pig,
exactly, exactly.
regardless the circumstance.
And I'll weigh that weight on me to know that they have a good lifestyle. I will.
Right. That's the better way to look at it. I mean, of course, we always long for what we didn't have, but
Right,
to know that your siblings are reaping the benefit of what they were able to grow through and get through,
right.
because of your presence, that's valuable, and
Yeah,
it's a mature way and a healthier way of looking at it, I
yeah,
think.
yeah.
Mhm.
It is. Like
Very
I said
true.
earlier, I'm not where I want to be, but I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be right now.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And that's good.
I am very happy because of that.
That's really good. That's really good. Is there a way that those that are listening can get a copy of the book?
You can go on Amazon.com, but also you can contact me at Daryl, DARYL, the number two at Yahoo.com for that information. But most importantly, you know, if I could end with anything from this series, number one, I want to thank you for even doing this for so many people who are listening. I don't think that you realize who you are to so many people.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so, you know, you had this youth ministry back in Ohio, and you know now you're teaching where you are, your current state. Um, but you know, continue doing what you're doing, whether it be a podcast or just ministering to people. Um, I even remember you praying for my family members. I don't
Mm.
know if you remember that, and so
Oh, yeah.
just those little things like that mean so much to so many people. And I just want to thank you for the invitation. But if I could leave anything for anyone, is that, you know, tap into who you are.
Mm.
It's very hard when you don't have the proper skills you need, so to speak, always. But if
Mhm.
you could just find a moment just to kind of sit back and be real with yourself, that's how you tap in. If you be
Mm.
real with yourself about things that you've been through, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, and just try to connect the dots, you start to learn yourself a little bit more. And happiness doesn't come overnight.
Mm.
And you're not always going to be happy in every area of your life, but you'll find comfort and satisfaction and rest within those things. And so, you know, I'm finding myself the older I get resting in certain things. and that's a good place to be in.
Very true. Very true. That means so much to me, even your encouraging words. It really, really, really does. You almost had me crying. Don't do that. I know that's our joke. Did you cry? Yeah, almost did.
Did you fall out? I did. So
But
yeah,
I am so grateful that you have come onto the show. It's just, it means the world to me. And I can't wait to have you back on because we're going to bring you back to talk about um, addiction, drug court, domestic violence, all those things. So I can't wait to have you back on the show. But thank you so much for being here and for everything that you shared on the podcast today. So once again, so excited to have my dear friend, Dr. Daryl Jackson,
thank you.
on In the Car with Shae. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.